kind of an environment, and the interdependence each person has in the platoon on helping one another, and then when the battle's over, and maybe even you're no longer in the service, the drastic change from one of absolute intense meaningfulness to one of now you have to make your life meaningful. And by the way, the prices of meat and vegetables are all going up, and the jobs are scarce, and I mean, just think about all that and the impact of that on the person who has had a life full of meaning, and now it seems empty. Might be similar in some ways. What happens to him eventually is that you get older and you get bored. And the thrill of skiing in really dangerous places, I'm thinking of heli skiing, where they drop you off on the top of a mountain, or those folks that have the wing type suits that jump off of the mountain, and just glide like, until they die, which happens. I remember watching the one video, and it's neat because you're wearing the goggles, so it's 360, and I'm on the head camera of this guy who's doing this, in Germany, and as he's coming down, and as I'm seeing everything on a successful landing on that one, the print comes up and says this is in memory of him because on one of his subsequent flights he hit the wall of the mountain at a great speed. Now, this is a thrill. This makes your life absolutely thrilling, from one thing to the next. But if you live through it, and you're old enough, it gets boring, believe it or not. Plus, your body probably has had so many injuries that you're too sore to do those kinds of things anymore. Plus, there's the assumption that you might be married now and have children. As a result, you have to move to the stage that he calls the ethical life. And the ethical life, his example, is Agamemnon. Now, if you remember the story, King Agamemnon is trying to gather all of the Greeks to go and attack Troy. They're all on an island. While they're on the island, the winds have died down and they can't leave. And the priests on the island blame, rightfully so, that the special animal that they had, the deer, was killed by the men to eat because they're starving. Not a whole lot of military planning in any of this, actually. And so the priests say that Agamemnon has to sacrifice his daughter. Remember the story? He has to sacrifice Iphigenia in order to appease the gods and have the winds changed. And if you recall, he sends for Iphigenia, lies to her, says that she's coming to marry Achilles. He doesn't even tell Achilles, although of course all that ends up getting everybody mad at him. But at a certain point, Iphigenia comes to realize that her people are counting on her sacrificing her life for their good. And she literally ends up at that point willingly going to the priest to be the sacrifice. So in a very interesting sense, Iphigenia is the Greek version of Jesus. Female, sacrificing herself for her people, right? There's multiple versions of how that ended, of course, but nonetheless, Agamemnon doesn't believe it. He's forced, for ethical reasons as king, to do what the priests ask and all the people expected. But at the same time, he totally loves his daughter and absolutely doesn't want to give her up to the priests to be sacrificed, but he has to do it. Kind of a contemporary example of this is I think of young parents who, while they were college students or maybe even high school students, gave up the faith that their family had, didn't believe it, not have been atheist, might have been agnostic, whatever, but they get married, they have children, and one of the things they think is our children need a religious upbringing. By the way, I would agree with that. I've had friends who didn't believe in God, didn't believe in a religion, raised their children on their own thinking that they would prevent the child from having to go through this religious stage, would be, much more educated eventually, and very frequently, I don't really have any statistics on that, it's just my own experience, knowing this from friends, that children that have grown up in that kind of environment actually have a great many difficulties. It does seem like young children need a religious training to bring them up, basically. It's almost as if, well, you need this in order for you to rebel against it. You need to believe in Santa Claus when you're young enough, right? And then I saw mommy kissing Santa Claus. Yeah. You end up, wait a minute here. There's something fishy going on, Same thing with the tooth fairy, of course, right? The tooth fairy. I never asked you guys about the tooth fairy, did I? No. Did you ever have a tooth fairy give you money under your pillow? Yes? Everybody?
No, I had my mom give me money under my pillow.
You did what, Dave?
Parents, I don't know anything about tooth fairy.
Really? Well, it's just kind of an American tradition. The child loses the first tooth, and blood is pouring out of the face, and the child realizes, hey, this is unusual, and they're concerned. So they usually do what children do. They cry. Yes? And the mother, without preparing this, I think it's already cultural. The mother takes the towel, stuffs it in the face of the child, stops bleeding, but also psychologically tells the child, you can take this tooth and put it in an envelope under your pillow, and the tooth fairy will come and give you money for this. And by that age, children in America already know the value of money and are like, money? I can get money for this? So the worry about bleeding is gone, even if it's still happening, right? There's money. There's money in this. I can get money for this too. In fact, the bad thing of it is, you see, a couple days later, the kids realizing these are getting loose too. I can get more money, and you see the kid, trying to knock the tooth out. No, you have to wait. Don't try to knock them all out at once, right? But again, the kid eventually, maybe they'll ruin it at school. The kid will come home and other kids told it there's no tooth fairy.
I remember taking the teeth out. I don't remember getting money for them.
He was
Knowing
wrong.
my mom, she probably gave me like a quarter or something,
Yeah, I lived in a room with
Yeah.
my three brothers, so they spoiled that a long time ago, so they just gave us the quarter.
I had a situation where, remember Christopher, our one son, had fetal alcohol. He stole the money from underneath my daughter's pillow.
Did she wake up?
no, he stole the money. So when she woke up, she had no money from the tooth fairy. That's just unforgivable. Although, remember, fetal alcohol means he didn't really realize he was stealing. Doesn't have that same kind of mind. However, the kid eventually looks at mommy and says, "Will the tooth fairy give me money tonight?" And the child's face says, "I know you are the tooth fairy. You're not fooling me. There's no tooth fairy." Yeah.
I feel like the whole kids need to believe in a religion thing is just like not correct because there's such a culture of religious shame also that if you grew up with religion you will probably grow up with some form of shame from it. And as someone who never grew up in a religious household, my grandparents aren't even religious. And they grew up in like the 60s and the 70s. We're pretty damn well adjusted. Like, I don't see the need to raise your kids in religion when it can harbor shame in them.
I am convinced, though, that there's got to be a background narrative that they share that gives them their sense of values.
There is. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah. And remember, by my definition of religion, that is a religion. It's just you might not have an institution that you can necessarily say, "Oh, we go every Sunday," and they say these, hocus pocus kind of words, Good. That's fascinating. But I mean, parents will join a church for their children and take them for their religious instruction. And by the time the kid's a teenager, the kids decided to quit that church too. Parents might still continue to go because now they have social connections. Remember Charles Murray's argument in Falling Apart. Might have been one of his later books. Oh, well, in any case, the four things a community needs in order to be successful is people need to be honest with one another, people need to be industrious, people need to go to church every week, doesn't matter what church, and they also need to be married and stay married. For a community to be a super zip. Well, the problem for the parents, though, in this situation is they actually don't believe in the meta-narrative that the church professes. I mean, you can pick churches. In fact, there are some churches that might not even call themselves a church. I mean, in town, I attend the Anchorage Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, which essentially has no dogma. They have 7 principles, and if you read the principles, dolphins are eligible to be Unitarians. It's that broad. So what do you really have to believe, to be a member? However, parents will continue to attend. The thing is, would they be ever in a situation where they would sacrifice their life, or in Abraham's case, sacrifice the life of one of their children for their beliefs? And the answer, of course, is no. Absolutely not. That would be grounds for, I'm not part of this anymore. That's ridiculous. They don't believe it. Agamemnon didn't believe it, but he was forced because of his ethical situation to sacrifice his daughter. So that stage on life's way is not satisfactory for Kierkegaard. So he goes on then to the next stage, and that's the religious stage. So Abraham is the example of the night of fear and trembling. And literally, Abraham is trembling at the point where he's at the decision point where he's actually going to have to kill Isaac. And Isaac sees the trembling in his father as Isaac is basically raising the knife to sacrifice him. And what Kierkegaard is interested in here is the commitment. The commitment the suspension of the ethical, the teleological suspension of the ethical. In other words, there's a reason I'm going to suspend what would be the normal ethical love of your child and sacrifice my son, my only one. Well, according to the story, remember the dilemma. Ishmael is already out there. Which one is this? Is it Ishmael or Isaac? But he's going to sacrifice his only son because he really, authentically is committed to, and by the way, this isn't really God. Not in the same sense that we might talk about it today. Not sure what God meant for Abraham. Remember, there was the Elohim, but also this is an intuition that Abraham has that God wants him to sacrifice his son. He didn't have somebody walk up and say, take Isaac, go kill him. That doesn't happen. That's not part of the story. This is all, remember, Julian Jaynes' book about the way that the bicameral mind seems to have evolved and gives us the sense that we're hearing some voice. The voice is invisible, but it's speaking to me. But that's in your own head, right? And if it's in your own head, it's his own intuition that God wants me to sacrifice Isaac. It's not really God. It's your own intuition. It's your own crazy idea. Maybe I should just kill him. Imagine. And yet, Abraham is committed. Fortunately, of course, in the story, there's a ram. Already, Deus ex machina, situated right there, where he's about ready to raise the. Did he actually raise the knife? You know, the knife is actually mentioned in the story 4 times. The ram is only mentioned once. Just saying. The ram seems like it was an afterthought almost. Kierkegaard wants to have the same kind of absolute commitment to a meta-narrative that he has to invent to feel relieved of this dilemma of having to believe his own meta-narrative. He's looking for absolute confidence in something that he himself has to make up. I mean, you can't do it. That's not going to work. You can't make up your own reason for living, and at the same time feel like, and I'm absolutely convinced that that's true. That's like a paradox. You can't do that, right? It's not going to work. And by the way, this is why I think he actually fails to avoid ultimate despair. He says that an individual needs to take this leap of faith. You have to really believe it. Take a leap of faith. By the way, a lot of this is traditional Lutheran. So remember, he's a Lutheran minister, almost. Take a leap of faith into a religious life, which is inherently paradoxical, mysterious, and full of risk. And one is called to it by the feeling of dread, which is ultimately a fear of nothingness. Well, this leads him to a sickness unto death. And he dies. He dies at 42. On the way home from the bank, his father had died, left him money, and he used up the money. He was making money with all of his publications. They were very popular. It's partially because of Copenhagen being a crazy town.